Turn off your lights. Make sure your doors and windows are locked. Things are about to get spooky. I Think My Dead Dad Was My DD by Kyle Bigham. All alcoholics know at some point the thing you love will kill you. It's a dangerous romance, a razor-thin line between logic and lust. This is something I have struggled with, and have blamed on my own father for my entire life, because at least, that way, I had an excuse to keep doing it. If this curse was handed down to me, I'm a victim. I don't have to think about how much I enjoy destroying myself, because it was inevitable. His true love claimed him when I was 16, after he drunk drove his truck through the front of our house, blaring sirens in hot pursuit. Rather than facing another DUI, he decided to try and beat the cops back to our house. The last thoughts that went through his head were, "See, I told you I could make it back." Then windshield glass, and finally, I'd assume, the family photo that hung on the wall over the couch. Wearing a seatbelt would have saved him, but we were thankful he hadn't. We wouldn't have been able to afford his legal fees. That image, the front of his work truck lining up my mangled father's corpse, draining into the carpet where I watched cartoons and ate cereal. It still comes to me whenever I see the red and blue of police lights at night. I have never drunk and driven, though there have been many times I have been tempted out of convenience or shame. However, this did not stop my love affair. No, it just gave it a purpose. Now my desires were justified by genetics and tragedy, and you can bet I wallowed in it. I lied, begged, and disappointed myself all the way to this point. Divorced, unemployable, and medium sober. Sitting at a run-down motel desk and asking myself if what just happened, happened. Because I just got a ride home from the bar, and my father was my DD. As I said, luck hasn't been on my side as of late. I've been living hand to mouth on the alimony my ex-wife pays me for at least a year. That is, until my cousin called me and told me he had a job lined up for me. I just needed to get there and be sober. I packed up, recycled all my empties in my Safari for gas money, and made a beeline for the coast. I was making good time, so I decided to stop for a bit at the Gilded Feather and play a few hands of blackjack. Before you judge me, I only had a beer, which was pretty impressive considering I went on the run that had me walking out with over $500 of the tribe's money. Happiness hadn't felt this crisp to me in a very long time. I was proud of myself for waving off the waitress when she came to freshen me up. This is a new start. Maybe I can finally turn this boat around. The only road to the coast was a 2-lane highway over a mountain pass. I'd been driving a Mita instead of a busted van from the 90s that sounded like a destruction derby car. I imagined it would have been a fun, scenic affair. All I could think about was what would happen to me if she dropped dead and left me walking through a country that had a mural of Bigfoot on the side of their grocery store. I had no issue pulling into a tiny town just before nightfall, and I didn't want to risk my luck turning on the other side of the mountain. Then, remembering the cash burning a hole in my pocket, I sent a text to my cousin telling him I'd be there first thing in the morning and rented a room for the night. The only place to eat was a bar about a mile outside of town. The plan was to leave at 5 a.m. and drive the last 75 miles or so to make my first day of work. I wanted to be clear-headed tomorrow morning, so I pinky promised myself that I wouldn't drink too much. The drive over to the aptly named Consumption Junction took 5 minutes. Hey, a man has to eat. It couldn't have been helped that the only restaurant had a bar. The locals were very friendly, as I imagine they don't often get new drinking buddies here. The crowd was my type, barflies that stare into the glass of whatever their favorite well liquor is and chase it down with a beer back. Our lives have no time for mixers, and sugar will give us diabetes. Eventually, the remaining 4 of us, who had been bonding over shots and rock and roll bands from our past, were informed it was closing time. My billfold was filled with 50 and scribbled on pieces of napkin with phone numbers of people I would never speak to again. It was then that I began to recognize that familiar feeling of disappointment, when it became apparent that your actions and your intentions differ. I lost count of my drinks, I couldn't drive, and all my shit was back in the motel too, so I couldn't just sleep here and take off in a few hours. My well-laid plans had been fucked by mice. This, surprisingly, is where I began to question my own memories. Agonizingly, I pondered my options and decided the valiant, noble thing to do would be to walk a mile back to my room, grab my stuff, and walk back to the van. Hopefully, I will have enough time to sober up and be at work on time. My cousin had stuck his neck out for me, and I had swore I was deserving of this risk. It wasn't the worst situation I had found myself in by a long shot, nor would it be the first time I had gone to work after an all-nighter. In hindsight, I should have slept in the van and picked up my clothes on the way out of town. What can I say? I was shit-faced. People take for granted the notion of streetlights. I imagine it's not too often that modern folks find themselves outside at night in a place only lit by the moon. The pale light plays tricks on your mind. I felt this truth more and more as I drunkenly ambled down the highway at 2:30 a.m. in the middle of nowhere. I was a lonely soul, and I felt it. My right foot kept finding loose rocks, and I kept finding myself in the muddy ditch. Within a half an hour of my trek, I had made it around the first bend in the road. I could not see any lights off in the distance. The only hint of civilization was the existence of the highway that kept wandering out from under my legs. I was completely soaked by the next bend after falling face first into the stinkiest pool of water in existence. In that moment, I was thankful for the darkness, as I would rather keep the mystery of what I was swimming in alive, instead of knowing the foulness of its contents. The realization I left my phone in my van to charge hit me about an hour into my journey, a complete guess, as I'm thoroughly convinced I had walked for 3 hours at least. I remember sitting on the side of the road for a while to cry, the roller coaster of emotions becoming too much for me. My loneliness so complete, as there would be no one for me to call for help had I even thought to bring it. I remember wishing someone would drive by and take pity on me. I just needed to get to my room and take a shower. I would be a better man then. In the distance ahead of me, a light appeared, blinding in the blackness that my eyes were accustomed to. Angelic, divine, I was saved. The prayer of a drunk answered. So I yelled out in the black, yelled for salvation, signaled with earnest as this titanic survivor had glimpsed the Carpathia and would never be left behind. The high-pitched whine of an old transmission downshifting was music to my ears. A Ford Ranger from the 1970s with a caved-in front end pulled up alongside me. I was glad for the state of it, as I wouldn't have to feel so bad for my muddiness. It was dark in the cab, so my savior remained a mystery. When I turned to put on my seatbelt, it became apparent there were none. "Thank you so much. I've been out there forever," I said honestly. The only reply came from the truck as it began to lurch forward slowly, the dark man shifting smoothly without using the clutch, like a truck driver from the past. "My dad had a truck like this," I remember saying to him, ignored again as the man just continued to pick up speed, shifting. His ranger didn't have seatbelts either, I said, finishing my thoughts about how useful they would have been in my head. That bar is a lot further from town than it looks. It took me 5 or so minutes to get there in my van, but I've been walking for hours. I was startled by his voice. You came from the bar? Yeah, from consumption. A little chuckle from the night's festivities regarding its origins blossoming in my brain now that the fear had gone to bed. Ugh, was the noise he made, shifting and accelerating. I began to notice the trees ripping past us now. Wasn't sure what gear we were in as the speedometer read 75. The fear was awake, and I wished to be back in my stinky puddle again. You must know these roads well, like the back of your hand, I said, trying to tactfully broach the subject of our unbelievable speed. I may have been drunk, but unprofessional, and even incapacitated. I would have realized there was no way he could be making these corners without braking. All I could do was hold on as this madman pressed harder on the gas pedal and changed gears. Hey man, this isn't cool. What the hell are you doing? He pressed on, unaffected by my obvious distress. You smell like liquor, son. Well, yeah, I was at a bar, man. Slow down. They buy you drinks? He spat into the steering wheel. Did you take liquor from them in there? The sudden change in the shadow man caused me to piss his seats. I was absolutely terrified and drunk and hurling down a 2-lane mountain road with a complete stranger. I can remember looking into his face, straining to see him, and only finding darkness. It was as if he wore a black hole as a mask. I recognized the rage. I had worked my entire life to drink away its place in my childhood. Is that what you wish for your memory? Answer me, boy. He shifted again. Look into yourself. Is there anyone left to remember you? When this truck stops, will there be anyone to make sure you're put to rest? He screamed in the cab of the truck and continued shifting, his left hand furiously moving back and forth on the wheel guiding us, though it felt like the truck was on rails. There were no longer trees flying by, as now the entirety of our surroundings had become a blur outside the truck. My hand searched for a solid place to brace, moving to his dashboard, bleeding for security. Consumption leads to rot, he bellowed. All dead things rot. I crunched something in my clasping hands and pulled it to my face, only to recognize my own countenance staring back at me. It was a faded picture of me and my family standing outside our house, all waving and smiling for the camera. I looked at the man's face and only saw my imagination. Glory to those who know their place, that know they are burdened on those they love and look to pay that debt. Dad? This picture was real. I could feel it in my hands. Behind those waving, smiling faces is a broken home. Behind that broken family would lay a crumbling house. The overalls stained in a familiar pattern. Those hands, gnarled into clubs from work, were used to teach me better. I could smell Copenhagen and beer in the cab of the truck, body overpowered by Old Spice. I knew where I was. I knew who I was riding with. I knew where we were going, as I had visited often in my nightmares. And I began yelling, You're right, like father, like son, huh? I thought just because I never drank and drive, I was better than you. That because I never had kids and beat them, that we weren't the same. Yet, here we are. Here we are, alone and hurling drunk down the road in your truck. You win. Are you happy, Dad? Just like old times, except this time I get to be drunk too. My throat burned along with my eyes. Tears and sweat and alcohol came out of me as I unloaded everything that I hid from myself onto the man that left me behind. I screamed and I screamed and I screamed. And he facelessly shifted and swerved in anticipation and sheer hysteria. I began baying him. "That spot looks good, right there. Come on, any tree will do. Just make sure it's solid. I don't want to limp away from this, Dad." I reached under the seat and I found the emergency beer I was looking for, the one that I knew from experience would be there. "Look at you, Pops, still a man after my own heart." And as I cracked it, words began to flow out of the can. They began to bury into my legs. Righteous agony driven out my hysteria and replaced it with raw, unadulterated horror. "Oh my God, Dad, please help me." A broken child swatting at something wicked and looking for their parents' salvation. "I need you to save me." "There is nothing to save. You look to fill your hollowness with vice and sin. What would be left for you? You know what you are, and drink yourself into oblivion to hide from it." I could no longer hear the engine. It was just my father's voice in the tunnel of our collective fury. We, together, hurling down the road towards our destination. One already knew the way, and the other waiting to see how to get there. After looking into the face of the monster driving my father's truck again, easing deep into the blackness, I closed my eyes and accepted my fate. I woke up in a gully, completely soaked and disorientated, and about 15 feet off the shoulder of the highway. I had been laying there for a while, as my hands were pruning from the water, and I was dreadfully cold. It wasn't until I made it back to my motel room and stripped naked in front of the mirror did I see the true extent of my injuries, though I had felt them on the way. Black and blue covered my shoulder and chest, all decorated with thousands of little cuts, my thighs ravaged by little pin-sized holes oozing. My face got the worst, as both of my eyes were almost swollen shut, and there's a massive gash across my forehead. If I didn't know any better, I suggest I went through someone's windshield. Of course, that's ridiculous. There was no accident anywhere near where I woke up. Not that I looked very hard, admittedly. Call it a hunch. When I walk back to get my van, I won't see any wrecks being hauled off. They cleaned it up a long time ago. I watched them in my PJs doing it. The sun is coming up, and I'm going to miss my first day of work. Oh well, that bridge was very stupidly built of flammable material anyways. But I wanted to sit and type this all out before I can shower and sleep away this nightmare. It's more than likely than anything that I fell down during my journey home and tried to break my fall with my face. The hill I had to climb up to get back on the tarmac was so steep, it took a few tries, and there were plenty of rocks for me to find. These visions are so vivid, though. They feel so real. I haven't thought of the inside of his truck in so long. The beer under the seat was something my brain would have to dig deep in the files for in order to turn it against me. This is far beyond rock bottom. This is deep into the bedrock, separating our realm from hell. The black hole face looked into me and was disgusted. Real or not, it's time for change. Obviously, anyone I tell will dismiss it because of my disease, because of my reputation. I think I'll use this little shard of broken glass I found in my hair as a reminder. Thanks, Dad, for helping the only way you knew how. It took 3 nuclear detonations and the loss of several lives to finally take down the monstrosity with multiple heads, eyes, and wings that appeared over the skies. Though it shouted, "Be not afraid," were not fooled and feared more than were coming. Rulesville. House 152 has a strange list of rules. By Master Olaf 740. When I got my new house, there was a note on the front door addressed to me. I went inside and opened the note. The note read, "Hello, new owner. Welcome to your new house. This house is a beautiful 3-bed, 3-bath house, but it's not as great as it appears. There are some rules you must follow. 1. Every night before you go to bed, you must make a plate of food and put it in the attic. 2. Don't play music after 6 p.m. 3. If you see someone looking through the windows, ignore it. 4. If you hear strange noises under your bed, stay perfectly still until you don't hear anything. 5. Don't leave the house after dark. 6. If you happen to be outside after dark, don't go into the house. Hide somewhere and don't let them see you. 7. Don't talk to anyone about the rules. 8. Visitors only allowed between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. 9. Make sure to always follow the rules, no matter what. Have fun, and I hope you enjoy your new house." I put down the note, figuring it was all a big joke. I threw the note away and figured I'd sort everything out in the morning. I went upstairs and went to bed. I woke up at 8 o'clock to the sounds of someone knocking on my window. My heart skipped a beat as I remembered the third rule from the note. If you hear someone looking through your window, ignore it. I brushed it off as a strange coincidence and got out of bed. The house was quiet and the sunlight poured in through the curtains, making everything seem normal. I shook my head, thinking how ridiculous it was that I even considered taking that note seriously. I went downstairs, made some coffee, and decided to start unpacking. As I started placing dishes in the kitchen, I noticed the trash bin where I had thrown the note. Curiosity tugged at me and I retrieved it, reading it over again. The rules were bizarre, but the house was old. Maybe it was a leftover prank from the previous owner. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. I unpacked more, familiarized myself with the creaking floors, and even admired the spacious attic. But as 6 p.m. approached, a weird sense of unease crept over me. I remember the second rule: don't play music after 6 p.m. I didn't plan to play music, but the fact that that rule even existed made me more cautious. I checked the clock and noticed it was exactly 6:01 p.m. A strange chill ran down my spine. Suddenly, I heard a soft scratching sound from upstairs. It was coming from the attic. I froze. The first rule. Every night before you go to bed, you must make a plate of food and put it in the attic. I hadn't done it. I hadn't taken the note seriously. The scratching got louder, and then it stopped. Silence filled the house. I took a deep breath and tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just an animal trapped in the attic? But this house was sealed tight. There was no way anything could have gotten in. I stared at the ceiling, waiting for another sound. After a long minute of silence, I slowly walked to the kitchen and began preparing a plate of food. My hands shook as I placed it on the tray. The note never said what kind of food, so I chose leftovers from dinner and made my way to the attic. The moment I opened the attic door, the air felt colder. I climbed the steps, the wooden boards creaking beneath me. When I reached the top, I placed the plate in the corner and turned to leave as quickly as possible. But as I descended the stairs, I swore I heard faint footsteps following me. I locked the attic door behind me, my heart racing. That night, I lay in bed, wide awake, listening to every creak, every whisper of the wind, every rustling in the night. And then, just as I started to drift off, I heard something from under my bed. A soft whisper, a quiet, rhythmic thumping. I remembered the fourth rule. If you hear strange noises under your bed, stay perfectly still until you don't hear anything. I didn't move. I barely breathed. The thumping grew louder for what felt like an eternity, and then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. When the sun rose, I got up, bleary-eyed and wondering what I had gotten myself into. The aliens landed and demanded to speak to our leaders, so we collected every president, monarch, religious leader, and gathered to meet them. But they were unhappy and had only one response. Not them. And with that, our time together is coming to an end. First of all, I'd like to thank the writers who let me read their stories this evening. I found the first one very well written. A story about childhood trauma that follows you all the way to adulthood, and how easy it is to blame all your choices on something from your past that you had no control of, instead of trying to change and go down a different path. I can't think of a single person I know who got out of childhood without some scars. Some worse than others, of course. But personally, I think it's us trying to figure out how to move forward without letting those scars keep us down that really define us. And I want to be clear, not on your own. Everyone needs a helping hand, whether it's friends, family, or professional. The first step is always to realize that you don't want to go down that path, and figuring out what to do and where to get the help so you won't. I have never been shy on this channel how important mental health is to me, and I hope every single one of you will take the steps you need to make sure that you keep healthy in that way. Physical health is almost easier in some ways, because we have a lot more research on it, while mental health it's just in your brain, so it can affect you. But yet your brain, it controls every aspect of your body. So please remember how important it is. And with all that said, I also really enjoyed the second story. I do enjoy those rule stories, especially when there's a story built around them. I hope you guys are enjoying them as well. Now, if you enjoyed these stories, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. If you're new, please subscribe and turn that pretty little bell to all notifications. And of course, I would love a comment. Tell me what you thought of these stories, what kind of stories you like in the future, anything like that. I just love reading comments. If you're on the podcast and able to, please leave a review, and if you're on Spotify, you can also leave a comment. And if you know anyone who might enjoy these stories, please share it with them. It helps these stories and my voice get to new people who might not get it because of the algorithm. If you'd like to help in a more financial way, like these lovely people on screen right now, I do have Patreon and members. Thank you guys, as always, for your support. If you'd like to just do a one-time thing only, I do have PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, and Super Thanks on YouTube. But as always, guys, just thank you for watching and listening. It always has and always will mean the world to me, guys. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.